Welcome back to Old School Sports and our OOTP 23 playthrough of the Pittsburgh Pirates. We have just passed the trade deadline. We are beginning to push for the playoffs with these Pirates. As it stands right now, we are 4.5 games behind in the Central Division, third place behind both the Cardinals and the Brewers. We are desperately holding on to the final wild card spot in the National League, up just one game on the Phillies. Let's see, we're ranked 12th out of 30 teams in the latest power rankings, which also indicates that we are just holding on to that final playoff spot very desperately. We do feel that we need to not just make the playoffs this year with this team, but hopefully go on a long run, because it probably is going to be our last season with our longtime star, Isaiah Hill, having another solid year, 272 average, 29 homers, and 76 runs batted in with almost 2 months left in the season. That said, it's probably the weakest year of his career thus far, although he was recently named an All-Star for the 7th time in 7 seasons. But he's going to be making $29 million next year. And given the way our budget situation and our payroll situation looks, and even our salary situation for next year, it's going to make things much easier if we decide to move on from him. We did make a couple of moves ahead of the trade deadline, brought in a couple of veteran pitchers, Alex Rojas and Tony Ballesteros. You can see Rojas has already pitched a game for us. Ballesteros has not yet. Helped round out the end of our rotation. We traded away longtime fifth starter / reliever Omar Gaona in one of the trades. And then we also moved Bobby Astorga, a rookie, out of the bullpen, and temporarily demoted another rookie starter, Juan Bin Daoud, who had been pitching out of the pen most recently. Hopefully he will be back in September when we expand rosters. But figured that the addition of both Rojas and Ballesteros gives us a better rotation for this season, and hopefully holding on to that playoff spot and perhaps actually improving our playoff position. We also made one move to our everyday players. We traded away Vinny Tomei, who was making a good amount of money, and the veteran just wasn't working out. And we traded for a different left-handed hitter to have off our bench, Jaquan Hinton, who's having probably the best year in several years for him right now, hitting .255, and he's got 27 homers and 321 at-bats. Hopefully that bat as a left-handed pinch hitter and an occasional starter against right-handed pitching will deliver some big hits for our team over the next couple of months. As I said, we try to not just hold on to this playoff spot, but hopefully improve our playoff position somewhat. And we're still not ruling out the NL Central. Milwaukee is not an incredibly intimidating team. We'd have to say that St. Louis is, given that they have finished first in the division, and we have finished second in the division for 4 straight years now. But going to give them as much as we've got down the stretch and see what happens. And before we get to the game action, just one other note on the acquisitions of Rojas and Ballesteros. They do also help us if we decide we need to move on from Luis Longoria after this season too. He's fragile. He's expected to make over $13 million next year. Can see he's 11-4 with a 2.91 ERA, 163 strikeouts and 123 2/3 innings. As we keep him on a 90 pitch count to try to get him through the season, so he's quite honestly probably a Cy Young contender this year. But if financially that gets problematic, or if he suffers a long-term injury, and we can't afford to be paying him $13 million-ish to rehab, the fact that we do have both Rojas and Ballesteros for next year also at fairly modest levels since we got their teams to retain most of their salaries, does give us some options to at least have a respectable starting rotation with those two, Gonzalez, and then some combination of Valadez, Astorga, Mike Wright, Juan Bin Daoud. Maybe even give Jose Montoya another chance at some point, although as some have pointed out in the comments, the trade when we brought him on board definitely has not worked out. The fact that third pitch, the slider, just hasn't developed to be a real good pitch has resulted in him being a pretty mediocre starting pitcher who we've moved to the bullpen, hoping he can at least salvage some value for us there. But we thought we were getting a solid major league starter, and thus far that has not proven to have been the case. Taking a look at our schedule for August, we're starting off today against the Blue Jays, and then we've got a divisional series over the weekend in Cincinnati. Kind of a weird scheduling quirk where we're going to play the Padres 7 out of 10 days. Sandwiched in between there is a critical series in St. Louis, and then after an off day, a critical series home against St. Louis, face the divisional Cubs, and then go out west for the Diamondbacks and the Rockies before finishing up with a twin bill against the Dodgers. So definitely highlighting those series against St. Louis. Need to probably take 2 out of 3 in both of those to really make some meaningful move in the standings. And it was a good start to the month for the Pirates, although we lost the first game against Toronto in 14 innings, bounced back to split the series with them, and then we swept the Reds on the road. So now we begin the 4-game series at home against the Padres before headed to St. Louis for the weekend. 2.5 games back in the division right now, so good performance helped us make up a little bit of ground. Milwaukee and St. Louis both tied for first at this place, and we are up 1.5 games on the final wild card, since obviously one of those two teams would be winning the division at this point. And it was a respectable week for the Pirates. Split a series with the Padres. That was the disappointing part after winning the first 2 games. But then we did take 2 out of 3 on the road in St. Louis, so that was kind of the mission there. Hopefully we can do the same thing at home this week against them. So 3 games out in the division, only up 0.5 game on the Phillies, who have won 3 in a row for the wild card. So it definitely remains nip and tuck as far as making the playoffs this year. Hopefully we can take advantage of the opportunities that are in front of us and play a little bit better over this second half of the month than we have over the first. It hasn't been bad. Like I said, winning the series against St. Louis, sweeping the Reds, both really good things, but splitting the 6 games against the Padres and the Blue Jays, not exactly what we needed. So hopefully we can get the series in San Diego and then get the series at home against St. Louis over the coming week and get a little bit of momentum going with this team. And we did what we hoped to do, taking the series against the Padres on the road and then taking the series against St. Louis at home. So that's got us in a position where we are now only 1.5 games back, still in third place. Opened up a 3.5 game lead on the wild card, though, which is certainly makes us sleep a little better at night. Obviously, we've got a lot of work to still do over the last month and a half of the season. Some good news, Isaiah Hill, National League Player of the Week, .458 average, 11 hits, 6 home runs, 14 ribbies. Strong week helping him get his numbers back up to where you'd expect they would be. And the 29-year-old also hit the 300th home run of his career this week. So will definitely be painful and bittersweet if we have to move on from him for contractual and budgetary reasons at the end of this year. But nice to see him contributing to hopefully a resurgence in the playoff race for the Pirates, and then hopefully also a long run in the playoffs this year if we get there. And it's been a win one, lose one, win one, lose one, win one type of week for the Pirates so far. Still have 2 games at Arizona to hopefully change that pattern. And then we'll go to Colorado before hosting the Dodgers in the Twin Bill to finish off this month of August. So standings wise, still in third place, 2.5 back, but we've opened up 5.5 games on the third wild card spot at this point, with the Phillies going into a total collapse, which is good for us on the other side of Pennsylvania. Did get some negative news, though, that is going to have an impact on us, unfortunately. Luis Flores, starting first baseman, torn hammy, out for 2 to 3 months, so his year is over. He's a fragile player. We're always struggling to keep him healthy. Finishes with another solid year for us, 308 batting average and 10 homers and 286 at-bats. But you can see that getting more than half a season out of him is proven to be impossible for us. 79 games in 2043, 79 in 2044, and just 75 in this year, because he actually started the season on the IL, and then he had one previous trip for a hamstring injury earlier this year that it seemed like he had recovered from, but was not the case. So we will miss his bat. Fortunately, we do have, on his second stint with the team at this point, Jaquan Hinton, who will likely take over at first. And you might be thinking that we were going to bring Joel Fields back up right now to replace him, but actually we're going to let another player make his major league debut. You may remember we picked David Green several years ago in the 5th round of the draft, and we thought that for a 5th rounder he was kind of an interesting player. Very versatile defensively, can bunt a little, has a little bit of speed, and a good contact hitter, doesn't strike out, doesn't have a lot of power, but he is lighting it up this year in AAA with a 341 batting average. My thought is that Hinton is probably the guy we want to be our starting first baseman, but because Hinton bats lefty and Green bats righty, it's not inconceivable that we could end up playing Green a little bit at first base, particularly against left-handed pitchers. So we're certainly not going to force him into the lineup, but I'm going to give the versatile Mr. Green an opportunity to get onto the Major League roster as soon as we put Mr. Flores onto the IL. And certainly the loss of Flores will be a blow, but manager Jan Vasquez actually did exactly what we were potentially thinking. He's going to be playing Hinton most of the time at first base against right-handed pitching, and then David Green will get those opportunities against left-handed pitching. And I think with Green's defensive versatility, certainly could see some starts, particularly at second base and third base, if and when Guzman and Medrano need a day off. And even with the loss of Flores, finished off the week the way we wanted to, with a couple of wins at Arizona. So now we travel to Colorado before finishing off the month with that twin bill against the Dodgers. Taking a look at the standings, 3 teams separated by a game and a half in the Central, and we are up 6.5 on the Nationals for the wild card. So feeling increasingly confident that we're going to make it to the playoffs, and it's not a huge step to the division. And with the Mets, with a worse record than the Cardinals, Brewers, or Pirates leading the NL East, it's conceivable that whoever wins the NL Central is going to have a first-round bye, which would be huge for us. We've already played a lot of game against the Padres. Now we're facing off against that very powerful Rockies team that took us out of the playoffs last year. So hopefully we can get 2 out of 3 against them, even though we're going to be on the road. And unfortunately, the end of August was brutal for the Pirates, swept by the Rockies, and then lost the doubleheader to the Dodgers. So that puts us in a very different position than where we thought we were going to be. 4 games out in the division at this point as September begins. Still up 4.5 on the wild card, but with 5 losses in a row, not the way we wanted to start off the final push for the playoffs here in September. Taking a look at the team statistics, despite those 5 losses in a row, it was still a nice August 17-13 record. Stand 8th in the National League in runs scored, 3rd in runs allowed. So batting is getting a little bit better. Pitching, I guess, is kind of hanging in there, maybe getting a little bit worse from the last time we checked in. Fielding still very good, so that makes me feel good that the tough decision we made last offseason to move on from Tony Santana and try to upgrade defensively at second and third base is helping us a little bit. Take a look quickly at some of our new additions. Alex Rojas has been good, 3-2, 3.29 ERA. Tony Ballesteros, since he came over, not so good. The 3-0 record is, the 5.70 ERA and 30 innings pitched is not. We'll see, how he does down the stretch. No guarantee that he's going to even be in the rotation for the playoffs. Still have a soft spot in our heart for the homegrown kid, Sal Valadez, who is a rookie, is now 10-8 with a 3.51 ERA. And Longoria has kind of slipped back recently. I was talking at the start of the month about how he was a Cy Young Award candidate, and with his ERA ballooning to 3.59 and another pitcher on his team with 3 more wins and an ERA that's half a run better, hard to see how Longoria, despite his prolific pace of strikeouts, would be getting a lot of votes over even the veteran Bobby Gonzalez. Take a look at Jaquan Hinton since he joined us, and it's worked out all right. 3 homers and 45 at-bats, hitting .289. Obviously going to be playing a lot more now with the loss of Flores. David Green in his first days in the major leagues, 4 for 15, does have a triple, walked a couple times, so he's been a decent player for us thus far. We'll also be getting some more playing time over the month of September with Flores gone. Ruacho has a sore elbow, moderate impact on his throwing, probably not a huge issue, particularly because we are going to bring Joel Fields back up. Did not hit much his first couple stints in the majors, but .295 average in AAA with 20 home runs and 261 at-bats. Just doesn't have a lot left to prove down there. Number 56 prospect in baseball, was our first-round pick 2 years ago. Bring him up to hopefully give us another bat. And then, of course, if you've been following closely, you know that we're going to want to bring Juan Bin Daoud back, who we had to send down when we picked up the 2 pitchers right before the trade deadline. He hasn't honestly been great in AAA, but he was holding his own at the major league level. Unfortunately, he's another guy who, if that slider doesn't develop very well, may end up pitcher in the bullpen for the long term, but going to give him another shot with the big club and see what he can do to help us down the stretch. He'll slide into a long relief role along with the fellow rookie Astorga. You can see both of those guys with ERAs in the high 4s are not pitching nearly as well as the other rookie Valadez with a 3.51 ERA and a couple Rookie of the Month awards. No big changes to the lineup here. We will force Henry Gonzalez into left, continue to give Isaiah Hill a little extra rest as Hill heads into possibly his final few weeks of his regular season with the Pirates. The .271 batting average is definitely low for him, but 38 homers, 94 runs driven in with several weeks to go. Looks like it's going to be, I don't know, a vintage Isaiah Hill season, but still definitely kind of meeting our expectations for what to get from him. Although you can see, the OPS is definitely trending down over the last few years, and no guarantee that he's going to get past last year's WAR, which was the lowest of his career. So as a player who's approaching 30 years old, appears he's probably already peaked, which makes it slightly easier to think about potentially moving on from him in the offseason. But We are not thinking about the offseason yet. Right now, we are thinking about what we need to do to get this team not just into the playoffs, but right back into the race for the NL Central. And quite honestly, 3 games at home against Milwaukee is exactly what we need to hopefully end this 5-game losing streak. And if we were able to sweep the Brewers at home, we'd be a game out or a game behind them coming out of this weekend. So certainly 2 out of 3 against them is the goal, and would love to get the sweep if we could. And before we start the series, did notice that Isaiah Hill is now leading the league in home runs, and Bobby Gonzalez, who we were just talking about, leading the league in wins. Ricky Rios is second in saves, but you've got a pretty good player in Isaiah Hill when he's leading the league in home runs, and you're talking about how it may be a bit of a down year for him. And we got more than we expected. We swept the series against the Brewers, so we're a game and a half back, as with the Brewers losing 3 in a row, the Cardinals have slipped back into their familiar perch in first place. Still up only 4.5 on the wild card, as the Phillies also swept their series. So that's the real good news. The bad news is our center fielder, Arturo Arellano, out with a strained oblique day-to-day for about 4 weeks. I think although it's only a minimal impact on hitting, throwing, and running, we probably got to put him on the IL. I don't think we can afford this to turn into something more serious. He's a pretty important player for us, very good defensive center fielder, hitting .283 this year with 23 home runs and 360 at-bats. He, like Flores, has spent some time on the IL, also coincidentally with a hamstring injury beforehand. Missed a good chunk of the season. We will definitely take a hit defensively, because we will end up most likely moving the youngster Alex Ruacho back into center field, who doesn't have quite the same range out there as Arellano does. And he's also still dealing with a sore elbow right now. But given that we're up 4.5 on the wild card, I want to be conservative. Certainly we want to win the division, but we've got to jump over 2 teams to get there. And I just don't want to put ourselves in a position where we lose Arellano for the playoffs. If we're conservative, they say it's a 4-week injury, but if we just don't play him for a couple of weeks, maybe that accelerates things a little bit. We do have extra players up on the roster right now with September roster expansion. So I'm going to be conservative, put Arellano on to the 10-day IL, and we'll go down to Indianapolis and see who else we want to bring up. And I think this finally means that our old friend Tony Rendon will be back. He's been up and down a couple of times this year, ended up playing just 11 games in Pittsburgh, so most of the year down in AAA. Has not hit well there, but he is a versatile defensive player. Thought about bringing up the young catcher, Chris Rodriguez. He has got his batting average up to .237 in AAA. But Quiroz is hitting .281 on the year. He's doing his job. I just don't see the need for a third catcher right now. So we are going to bring Mr. Rendon back to the majors, and we are going to force Alex Ruacho. Well, we'll see what the manager wants to do before we just force Alex Ruacho into center field. And he wants Ramon Herrera in there. Herrera is the more experienced defensive player. A little bit better range. Racho's still in the lineup pretty regularly. I think I may flip things just a tiny bit. Obviously going to put Gonzalez into left to get him a little more field time. Gives some rest to Isaiah Hill. We will put Ruacho in center against left-handers because Herrera is a left-handed batter, so we will let him play center against righties. We'll have Ruaucho out there against lefties, and then that'll let us get a little bit of playing time for Joel Fields instead of Herrera. Would rather have the younger player out there. I think we will change it though, and we are going to let Gonzalez play right and Fields play left. So get the youngster Fields a few extra at-bats, but at least against right-handed pitchers, we'll have Herrera, who's a little better defensively, getting some playing time. He's also been complaining to us that he is not a backup player, so the fact that we'll get him a little playing time will help, although his morale is actually good right now. But yeah, you can see he is still angry about his role on the team, so hopefully a few extra at-bats for him will help. But certainly the losses of Flores and Arellano, two of our more talented young players for the final stretch in September, is not optimal. But we'll see how it goes. As I mentioned, we are still up 4.5 games on the wild card, so and we're only 1.5 out in the division. So although the injuries are painful, literally and figuratively, we'll try to overcome them. We've got 2 games at Cincinnati, kind of a weird schedule with 2 off days and 4 days, and then a series at home against the Yankees. And I guess it was a good week for the Pirates. We did it the hard way, losing our first 2 before sweeping the Yankees at home. So now we've got 3 at home against Atlanta, and then a critical series on the road against Milwaukee. Taking a look at the standings, 2 games out behind the Cardinals, only a half a game behind the Brewers. Only up 3 at this point on the Phillies for that final wild card spot. So the season is not clinched by any stretch of the imagination. You can see our magic number for the playoffs is still 14. So we got to still string some wins together at this point. It's also at a point where both the Mets and the Cardinals have the same record now, so the battle for that second bye in the National League, likely behind the Rockies, is intensifying between the 3 NL Central teams and then most likely the Mets. So they're probably hoping that all of us are knocking each other off over these last few weeks of the season. Facing the Braves, who have already been eliminated, is not bad, but that series against Milwaukee is going to be critical. Obviously, we want to win the division, but at the very least, getting past them in the wild card race would make us feel a little more comfortable that as we head into the final week and a half of the season, if we can, be ahead of Milwaukee, that puts us in a much better position to hopefully at least make it into the playoffs. And after a slow start to the week with losing the first 2 games against Atlanta, went about as well as could be expected. We avoided the sweep at home, and then we swept Milwaukee, 4-game sweep on the road. So that was huge as far as our playoff push and the standings. You can see we are in a flat-footed tie right now with the Cardinals after winning 5 in a row, up 2 on the Brewers. So feeling pretty good that we're going to be in the playoffs. Now the hope is to finally slay the dragon that has been the St. Louis Cardinals and officially get by them in the NL Central. Unfortunately, it seems conceivable with the Mets at 88 wins that whoever wins the NL Central will end up having to host a first-round playoff series. But that's still better than the alternative. Would definitely still like to get the division won. We don't have any games against the Cardinals left, unfortunately. Honestly, the only divisional games we have left are 2 against Cincinnati and then 4 against Miami. But the schedule lines up well for us. These final 9 games of the season are all going to be at home. So from that perspective, we're in a pretty advantageous spot. Cincinnati has been eliminated. Miami has been eliminated. and the Diamondbacks have been eliminated. And I think that's who we're playing, right? Those are all last place teams. Yeah, the schedule sets up perfectly for us. I mean, we're in a flat-footed tie for the division with the Cardinals. We've got 9 games left, and they're all at home, and they are all against last place teams. So if the Pirates are ever going to win a division, this seems to be the opportunity to do it. And with the way that schedule lines up, I'm not going to rule out trying to get past the Mets and getting a first-round bye. That's got to be the goal. We really disrupted what this team had been last offseason to try to get us to a point where we could do more in the playoffs, and certainly winning the division would be a big step in that direction. Getting a first-round bye would be a bigger step in that direction. And then obviously actually stringing some series victories together in the playoffs would be the way to prove that we're actually a different team than we have been in the past. And this end of the season is going very well. Swept the 2 games against Cincinnati, took 3 of 4 against Miami. So we've got 3 at home left against Arizona. Taking a look at the standings, we're only up 1 on the Brewers. We have clinched a playoff spot. Everyone in our division has clinched a playoff spot at this point. Unfortunately, the best we could do is tie the Mets for the second best record in baseball, even if we sweep. So looks like we will be playing in a wild card series, but with the way things are positioned right now, pretty likely. Actually, it's not totally guaranteed because the Padres are in that number 1 wild card spot right now. So we really need to hold off the Brewers, who we only have a 1-game lead on for the NL Central. It's good that the Cardinals finally are not going to win the NL Central, but let's make sure that it's us that wins it rather than the Brewers. So taking a look at our pitching staff for these final few days, we've got Longoria going today, which is fine. Should be about ready. I don't know exactly when the National League series are going to start, but if we pitch him today, at the very least, he'd be able to go in the second game of a wild card series. So want to get the W today, and hopefully can't completely clinch, but if we win today and Milwaukee loses, then we're up 2 with 2 games to go. So let's see what we can do against Arizona. They've got a pitcher who's 1-1 with a 5.06 ERA on the mound against us. Hopefully Longoria can get the job done for us and get us 1 notch closer. 4-2 victory, so that was good. Longoria, not great, but gets his 14th win of the season. 9 strikeouts over 5 1/3, allowed 2 earned runs. So we are 1 step closer to finally getting our second division title with this team. Still only up 1 on the Brewers, though, who have won 7 in a row. So after we took that 4-game series against them, kind of thought they might be left for dead, but they have bounced back after we swept those 4 games on them, winning 7 in a row at this point. Who do we have on the mound today? Bobby Gonzalez going to be going for his 17th win. Again, I think we want to ensure that we've got home field in that wild card series, so we are not gonna get cute at all in terms of winning the division. We're going to put our aces on the mound and see what happens. Hopefully Gonzalez gets the W. Would be nice if Milwaukee also lost and we could go into game 162 knowing that we had the division. We got some messages here. Maybe that's a message that we're division champs. Pittsburgh narrowly wins the NL Central. So that is good. A quest of ours for a long time in this. We started this playthrough in 2038. We won a surprising division title in 2039, missed the playoffs again in 2040. but now have 5 consecutive trips to the playoffs. And the first 4 of those were wild cards, second place behind the Cardinals. Now we finally have the NL Central title back. So although it won't mean a first round playoff bye because the Mets have 96 wins and the Rockies have 98 wins, at least we are going to have home field advantage. But as might have been expected, that home field advantage is going to result in us playing and hosting the longtime nemesis Cardinals. They are going into the postseason on a real tough run, 2-8 record, as opposed to the 9-1 record that the Pirates are on right now. You would think that would work in our favor, but we are going to have an opportunity to really kind of slay the dragon that is the Cardinals when we get to host them in the wild card series coming up shortly. And for game 162, looks like Ballesteros will be on the mound. That's fine. He has gone 5-0 with us, but with a 5.31 ERA, so certainly no guarantee that he's going to be in the rotation for the playoffs. Obviously, we'll only need 3 pitchers for the wild card series at most, so he certainly won't be in the rotation for that. The question is whether we'd feel better with him or Valadez as our 4th starter if we move on to a divisional series. But before we get to that point, let's get through game 162. Hope that there is no last scary injuries. 3-0 win. So Ballesteros, presumably that meant a good performance. Yeah, no earned runs over 5 innings, 6 hits, 2 walks, got the ERA with us down to 4.75. So a nice performance from him to go to 6-0 with the Pirates. And the Pirates are finally NL Central champions, 94-68 record. Finish the season on a 9-1 tear. We'll be hosting the Cardinals, who did win their last 2, so playing a little better as the season comes to an end. But we've got the home field advantage. We'll see if we can make the most of it. Bobby Gonzalez, the veteran out of nowhere, looks like he's going to be our Cy Young candidate this year rather than Luis Longoria. 17-12 record, 3.07 ERA, which was 3rd in the NL, led the National League in wins. And Ricky Rios ends up tied for the National League lead in saves. Taking one last look at the team statistics, a 19-5 record in September to not just clinch the playoff spot, but clinch the division. So the Pirates are playing their best baseball in years as we prepare for the playoffs. Runs scored, we finished middle of the pack, 8th in the National League. Runs allowed improved to 2nd in the NL. The bullpen has been lights out. Starting pitching pretty solid. Defense really good. So I think the big changes we made last offseason appear to have paid off somewhat in terms of having a team that is now a division champion that's going to get to host a playoff series. But the proof is going to be in what we do in that playoff series. And as we've talked about frequently, could be the final playoff series for Isaiah Hill as a member of the Pirates. Ended up hitting .268 with 42 homers, 112 ribbies in the brilliant career that he has had. That is definitely his worst season. 4.6 WAR by a full run is the worst that he's done. 138 OPS plus is the worst. 133 WRC plus is the worst. 268 batting average is the worst. 549 slugging percentage. 333 on base percentage, all the worst that he's had. So scores 100 runs for the 7th consecutive season. Drives in 100 runs for the 7th consecutive season. Has 40 or more home runs for the 6th time in 7 years in his career, and it is still undoubtedly the worst season of his career. This is a guy that would be really cool to kind of have as a franchise icon for his entire career. Probably not going to happen. We'll have to see how the postseason goes. If we get on a long run to the World Series and we generate tons of revenue, and Mr. Nutting, the penny pincher, goes to meet his maker during the playoffs, and we get a new owner who's not as penny pinching, is there some chance that maybe we'll get a big bump to the budget that allows us to keep him? I'm saying there's a chance, but I don't think it's likely. Looking at the accounting at this point, we're projected to make around 18 million, but that number will be higher with at least 2 home playoff games to boost our finances. With the team playing great baseball over the second half of the year, particularly the last month, had a good number of sellouts. So overall, attendance is up from last year. Revenue is up from last year, although we did not get attendance quite enough to meet Mr. Nutting's goal of pretty much selling out every game. But we improved our team defense significantly. We reached the playoffs. We've achieved a lot of the goals that he had for us, and now we've got the opportunity to go chase our goal, which is to finally get a World Series title for these Pirates in the postseason. And that is what we will try to do in our next episode. But before we do that, I'm going to just check in quickly on Mr. Arellano, and that is good news too. Only 1 day left. So the fact that we got the division without him, and it looks like he will be back and healthy and in center field for us in the playoffs, is a big step in the right direction. Obviously, Flores still being down 6 to 7 weeks, no hope of getting him back, even if we make it to a World Series. But with Arellano coming back and Mike Wright just having 1 day of back spasms, the team is as healthy as we could hope when we're going to be looking to put that postseason roster together at the start of our next episode. So until then, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.